Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Press Break podcast. I'm Chelsea, and of course, I am joined by my co-hosts, Tyler and JB. We are ready to have a good, fun, chaotic time today, as we always do. There's a lot to talk about. We have college. We have a bunch of stuff happening coming up in college that just happened, rankings, blah. So we're going to get into it, starting with probably one of the biggest games of the weekend, which was Texas versus South Carolina. South Carolina's second loss of the season, and the first time that they've lost two games in one season since the 2021-2022 season. Pulled that stat yesterday while I was doing stuff, so dropping that in there for you.
Go.
But yeah, wild game. It ended up being pretty close. If we're being honest, I didn't catch it because this weekend was nuts, y'all. Not to get too men up in here, but the NBA trade deadline kind of did me in. But yeah, right. Tyler's energy today is so chaotic, which I love. It's probably because the Birds won the Super Bowl.
I'm on such a high right now.
Yeah,
I'm on such a high.
Go Birds!
Go Birds!
Go Birds! Fly Eagles fly! Mm-hmm. Philadelphia. But yeah, so. Yeah, but I didn't catch the game, so these two are gonna. I mean, I watched the highlights, but Tyler, we'll start with you since you're just buzzing here, getting ready to go. Yeah. What happened?
First off, fouls happened.
Yeah.
Especially in that first quarter. Without, I never want to like. By no means am I saying like, oh, South Carolina lost because of the refs, but it's fair to acknowledge the fact that when you're, the rotations and the style that South Carolina wanted to bring to this game and the aggressiveness that we're used to seeing South Carolina playing with was dampened by the early foul trouble that they had. Like 2 fouls, I think it was on like 3 or 4 players, like early on. And then the refs didn't really call it the same way the rest of the game, so like that was just like weird. But women's basketball refs,
they do be doing that.
But like it was a big deal. But ultimately, this game came down to the fact that I felt like this was the first time that South Carolina got punished for not having Ashlyn Watkins.
Yeah.
And in the Texas game, the first one, you saw the rebounding and like the offensive rebounding and everything, but ultimately they didn't get punished for it. You could see like kind of the cracks in the armor, but it wasn't nearly as dominant of like a rebounding performance or anything like that. Mostly because Texas was more efficient with their post play in this game and making layups and whatnot. But it kind of just came down to that for me. Like that was, and then also Madison Booker. Obviously in that first game against South Carolina, like that was, frankly, probably the worst game of her career. Like, and that's because she set such a high standard for herself in the way that she's been playing. And no, it wasn't the most efficient game, but you still get up to 20 points. And you also make your free throws if you're Madison Booker, which was a massive, massive point in this game where both teams just shot poorly from the free throw line. But Madison Booker goes 6-7, shoots 7 of 22 from the field. Again, not efficient, but ultimately those Madison Booker buckets were kind of, to me, what dampened also South Carolina going on that, like, what always feels like the inevitable run that you go on. Like, whether it was a post making a layup, whether it be like an Oldacre or Taylor Jones or Madison Booker getting a bucket, it was always one of those two styles of buckets that stopped South Carolina from feeling on what was that going to be that inevitable run, especially in the second half. Mm-hmm. And that was the difference because they didn't have any of that to stop the run in the first game, and it ended up just getting disgusting in that first game. But the defense from both sides I thought was really good. I'll tell you right now, to me, Texas, I understand that Texas is a very, very, very good basketball team, but I needed to see the big win to have like long-term March Madness confidence in Texas. Because again, I don't know in this day and age, in the year of our Lord 2025, if you can win a championship without shooting threes. I just don't. And we saw the way that South Carolina was able to just stack aside of defenders, and they just didn't care about what other player was in the corner because they're not going to shoot the three. And so, but obviously, you go and prove that you can win a game against a top team in that style. So for me, I love to see Madison Booker have a much better game in this one. She was impactful and more than just scoring as well. And ultimately, with the understanding going into this game that Texas is indeed a very good team, this still ranks them up a bit just because they haven't had that really big top tier win so far. But under this style, they're going to cause havoc for a whole lot of teams, and they were able to do that against South Carolina.
And like the thing that is like on my mind right now is that like one, the SEC tournament is going to be wild because like, all of these big teams that we're talking about, South Carolina, Texas, LSU, they're all in the SEC. So like Tennessee had a big win.
This is South Carolina's first regular season SEC loss since 2021.
Yeah,
like it felt weird. Like
it was weird.
Like,
yeah,
digesting it. I was like, what do you mean South Carolina lost in the SEC?
Well, like I saw like because again, like I wasn't really online this weekend, and then I go and it's like, oh, South Carolina, and I was like, they lost. Like it's just like a weird thing that you have to like. Jamie, any thoughts on the game?
Yeah. I mean,
I have some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I was really, really impressed by sort of the supporting cast from Texas. You see a lot of discussion about Madison Booker, a lot about Rory Harmon, and in this game, the rest of the team stepped up in a really big way. In the first game, I mean, Kyla Oldacre had a solid game, not as efficient as you would generally hope, like did a lot for them when they needed it, but still had a lot of shots that usually she would finish, I think. And in this latest matchup was a massive boost coming in off the bench. Had 13 points, so second most on the team, going 6 of 10 from the floor. And so that was certainly really big. My kind of side note on her is that I think she has such potential. I think she has grown so much this year, and I'm really excited to see her be more of the go-to post player, presumably next year once Taylor Jones graduates. I'm very, very high on Kyla Oldacre. I think that with another year of development, she's absolutely going to be someone that is in a lot of discussions for draft picks next year. But beyond that, I mean, you have Jacqueline Gamwon-Ntanda, who has stepped up in a huge way with Aaliyah Moore out, who doesn't miss a field goal and is going in and not just field goals, but getting to the rim herself, making it happen. And so Madison Booker doesn't have the most efficient game going 7 for 20, but she draws enough of the defense and makes enough shots that you justify continuing to shoot it. You still have the confidence to continue to shoot it. As Vic Schaefer has said, you know, the kind of performance she had in their first matchup is not at all indicative of her capability. And, you know, he said that she was probably more down on herself than he was on her. He's like, you know, you just kind of shake that one off because it happens. And went out and was able to, draw a lot of the attention from the defense, still get quite a few points for her team. But as you said, Tyler, did so many other things as well. Was their leading rebounder with 11. You go out, you have 3 assists, you have 4 turnovers. But once again, you're going up against South Carolina. If you're going to be looking to make plays, you're going to make turnovers. And so that's something that as you grow, as you mature, you're going to have to learn. Okay, some games aren't going to be about the box score. You might not have the most beautiful stat line you've ever had, but if you come away with the win, that's what matters. And so for Texas in a game where Rory Harmon goes 1 for 9 and has 4 points, to then have the rest of your team shooting well over 50% outside of Madison Booker and Rory Harmon, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and do all the math, but I mean, well over 60% from the rest of the team. So certainly elevates, I think, Texas a little bit in my eyes as well. Statistically, they've been showing that they're probably a top, at the very lowest, I think, 4 team for quite a while now, as far as our Hoop Stats rankings go, as far as quite a few different sites go. But this is the first time that I watched it, and against elite competition, I said, yes, I see it. And especially given that they only took 4 threes, they go 0 for 4 from the 3-point line, but they have had games where they'll make more. And, you know, Shea Holly is a very capable outside shooter, and Jekalenka can make them. You can get Jordan Lee to knock them down, Justice Carlton. So they've got some players who can shoot it, who I think in the right circumstance will elevate them. But yeah, it's never going to be something they rely on heavily.
Right.
But I do wonder now what the next step is against the next really elite team they see, if they can get back to knocking down just a couple of those threes, as you say, Tyler. That's where you start saying, okay, they're really putting it together. And this is the time of the year to put it together.
Yeah.
And I'm with
you.
I'm not saying anything like mind breaking here when it's like the deepest teams are the ones that are gonna do the best. Like, I feel like the thing with South Carolina, why they're so dominant, is because like literally every player on that roster can play at an elite level. Like,
they got 2 starting lineups.
Yeah, like you got Malaysia Fulwiley coming off the bench, which is like our go-to example. But yeah, these teams that also have that, like, I feel like, and again, we're gonna like get into talking a little bit about UConn, but like when I compare that, it's like they don't have the depth. And I mean, injury is a big part of that, but they don't have the depth that some of these other teams have, and that's why they struggle, especially in like late game situations, which again was the thing that happened against Tennessee because they led for a lot of that game. But yeah, I mean, should we just get into it right now? Because we have a big UConn versus South Carolina game coming up as well this weekend, which is going to be like a huge, I mean, there's so many different dynamics going into this game. UConn hasn't won a big matchup this entire season. South Carolina, as Jamie can attest to, loves to go on a rampage after they lose a game. Unfortunately,
they do have an SEC game before they see
okay.
UConn,
So it won't be, maybe that team will get the brunt of that. But yeah, Iowa State was unfortunately the recipient of that post-loss game from South Carolina. But yeah, and then you have UConn, who lost last week against Tennessee for the first time in like over a decade. I think people are saying since the Candace Parker era. And there was so much about that game because I was watching it, funny enough, at the Raptors practice facility because it was the trade deadline day and we had it on. And it was just like the end of that game and like the fact that there was just like so many opportunities for UConn to get ahead. It didn't happen. There's like fouls and stuff that definitely, there was a call that should have been called to UConn that wasn't called to UConn. Like the reffing was a little bit, but at the end of the day, like, I mean, in those close game situations, you shouldn't even be in that situation a lot of the time. Like you need to, and it's just, yeah, like I am worried for UConn going into the South Carolina game. I don't know about the two of you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you should be. I mean, South Carolina, to bring it back a little bit to the Texas game, like their depth, to your point, is their strength.
Yeah.
But they only had one player in double figures in that game.
Yeah.
In Texas, and that was Malaysia Fulwiley. And Joyce Edwards has been phenomenal. Has been on a tear recently, and struggled. Not necessarily struggled, but she just didn't get a lot of shots up against Texas, which like happens against Texas. Like there's no shame in that.
That's some scouting report defense from Texas.
Absolutely, they made it a point. But the starting lineup also didn't. Nobody was really able to get much off. And I mean, Malaysia. I mean, the most shots anyone took was 9 from an individual player. And that was the first time where it's like South Carolina just wasn't able to get anybody into a rhythm at any point during the game. It could be any number of their players that ends up being the one to do so. But we just didn't see it against Texas in that way. And so I say that to say the UConn depth point, I think, and how they compare in that, I fully expect a higher tide for the win by committee kind of angle from South Carolina in this game against UConn. And for UConn, I mean, we've been talking about it. They had, to me, do I expect them to still host? Yes. Do I think that they have the resume to be hosting, assuming that they don't beat South Carolina? I don't think so. Are they a top 16 talent-wise? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. On their roster, absolutely. But they had to beat Tennessee to me to have that stacked level of resume. So it's a very weird, again, I think that they're a top 16. How do you weigh that? I don't know. But I worry the taste that the South Carolina game is going to leave in people's mouth if it gets the way that we think it can and how we've seen South Carolina just destroy teams at points.
Yeah, and like the weird part about the Tennessee game is that like UConn should have won that game. Like other than the last, I'd say like 5 minutes or the fourth quarter, like they were up at some points by like nearly 10 points. And like I don't know, what it is about these late game situations. It seems that UConn gets themselves in. I know depth is an issue, especially because you don't really have like the front court depth that a lot of these teams have. I mean, the rotations are a little bit weird. You have Sarah Strong, obviously, who's doing a great job, but at the same time, she's a freshman and like doesn't really have the height that a lot of these other teams have. And I mean, obviously, you miss Aaliyah Edwards in these situations. Shout out Aaliyah Edwards, who won 12-0 against Brianna Stewart in Unrivaled yesterday. Canada, where that was a win for politics and the country. Aaliyah Edwards said, "Canada, we are."
I would also like to say Canada at this point, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. Anyways, y'all are welcome whenever you want. But anyways, yeah, so that is an issue for them, I find time and time again, because I don't think the coaching staff has the trust in some of those other players that could come in. Like Jenna Elfie doesn't really get that many minutes. They have injuries in their front court that, you know, they weren't expecting. You have, and I feel like, unfortunately, like, yeah, that's been the tale of UConn for the past like 4 years, has been these injuries and not being able to get the most out of the players that are on paper are really good. Like you think about like Caroline Ducharme, who was really good in her freshman season, has basically been injured ever since, hasn't really taken the floor in years. You have Jana, who was out all season last year. You have, you know, all of these players that they just like don't have available to them, and then you end up with this really short roster, and these end of game situations end up getting really tight. So yeah, I could see South Carolina just really using their depth against them, really just like making sure that these players have like fresh legs, and that's what's gonna get them in the end. Like it's unfortunate because like what do you do?
Yeah, Jay, I was one point on the Tennessee game, and I'll let you ISO, but I don't know if excuse me, I don't think that UConn deserved to win that game, to be honest.
Really?
I thought, I mean, the way that Sarah Strong, she went 8 of 13, right? And but got slowed down in that second half of Tennessee, the way that they locked it on the defensive end. But also, like, you saw mistakes from UConn, whether it be Gino taking a timeout when there's a wide open lane, you know, or like, again, we've had the Paige discussion over and over about kind of flipping the switch in that way, and she played very well, I thought, in this game. I mean, she ends up with 14 points, 8 assists, like she's facilitating everything. But again, it's to your point, the late game execution. So it's like in either way, right? Whether it's an open game, I lean South Carolina.
Yeah.
If it's a close game, I lean towards the execution of South Carolina.
Yeah.
Like to me, unless you get to me, this feels like a game where you need superstar performances from your superstar.
Yeah, we need like a Paige Becker's like 40 piece.
Yeah, I don't really see, you know, if South Carolina is playing to the level that we know they can play at, I don't see a direct lane outside of that for UConn to win this game, to be quite frank. Jamie, I just that's all you know. I'll shut up on that part.
Yeah, no, you're good. I mean, I'll say that as someone who has seen, I think, about as well as either of these teams could play. There's certainly a lot of potential on either side. However, yeah, I think that some of the concerns for UConn especially would be, as you guys have kind of mentioned, the style of game. With Tennessee, something that is just so difficult is how frequently they sub, how up and down things are. I mean, UConn has, for a while now, relied pretty heavily on slowing things down and really dominating in the half court, and then that hasn't really been as effective recently with the way that they've had these issues with injury, with the way that they've kind of missed key pieces in any given lineup. And so they've had to sort of adapt and at times play faster. There isn't really a strong identity for UConn, especially this year, outside of just Paige Beckers and Sarah Strong. And so that certainly is a tough way to do things because two players are not an identity Those are just what your team runs around. And so the fact that they haven't really figured out, okay, what are we going to do for these two is part of why they've had these struggles. And then you look at South Carolina, and they have this tremendous amount of depth. They have the ability to cycle players in and out. They have the ability to kind of adapt to whatever is happening on the other end of the court and say, okay, we're going to go more defensive minded here, or okay, we're going to really run you up and down the court, or we're going to sort of pound the ball into the floor, and we're going to slow things down, and we're going to go into the half court. And they have the ability to do all of these things. And so that's where you have these counters for, okay, UConn, their supporting cast has the ability to step up in a big way. Okay, ask me how I know. But they haven't as much recently. But let's say that you have a game where, you know, they're looking more down the bench. They're saying, okay, Ashlyn Shade, you're getting a bunch of shots right off the bat. You're going to hit, I don't know, something crazy like 5 threes in the first quarter. South Carolina would then adjust to that and would counter. Right. And so you don't have as many ways to expose the opposition from UConn's side. And, you know, you guys mentioned like Sarah Strong, she really has been doing a lot for them, but at the end of the day, she's a freshman, and that is a lot of responsibility, especially when UConn continues to, okay, they pull someone in, they have Aubrey Griffin available. Well, guess what? Your Ice Brady's going out, you know? And so you just do not have any increased level of depth. You have a significant lack of consistency in who's even available, especially on the interior. And so it's certainly a tough ask, I think, for UConn. And South Carolina, there was some things that they struggled with a little bit against Texas, but that's a style that I do think made sense for them to struggle against a little bit. Texas has so much depth inside. That's the one place that South Carolina doesn't quite have as much. But guess what? If you're talking about matchups, UConn isn't exactly one that's probably going to expose you there.
Yeah. I just hope, if nothing else that we get from this game, I need this to be like the seeds planted for a long-term Joyce Edwards versus Sarah Strong like rivalry. Like I think that can be the matchup. Like obviously like UConn and South Carolina play every year, but I don't think it's a rivalry. Like it's never really like.
If anything,
it's just like 2 top tier programs that play every year, which I love. And I think more programs should do. But like it's not like a rivalry. It's not UConn Notre Dame. It's not UConn.
No.
Like there's not that. Like
it doesn't have the history. Like if maybe in the past like 3-4 years, maybe it's gotten a little bit chippy just because of like the online aspect of it, where like there's the whole like UConn versus, you know, and the online discourse. But in terms of like long standing historic rivalries,
it's not there.
It's no UConn Tennessee. It's no UConn Notre Dame. But
I think Sarah versus Joyce has the potential. Again, not even necessarily saying that. Excuse me, that it has to be like beef or anything like that, but like just from a pure like these are like the 2 best players in the nation at some point, and they're playing the same position and they're guarding each other. Like that has the makings to make this one of one of the top tier rivalries in women's basketball.
And that's honestly the matchup I'm most excited to see, because when you think about it, like you're talking about lack of identity with UConn. And I mean, their identity right now is solely Paige Beckers and Sarah Strong. But I mean, for Paige seems pretty intent on leaving.
Yep.
So that you get 1 year of that, and then you have to refocus next season. Who knows who they're going to retain, who's going to be injured, all of this. I mean, you're losing Paige, you're losing Aubrey Griffin, you're maybe AZ, you don't really know. Who knows like what transfer is gonna who they're gonna recruit, but like this is gonna be a whole new. And I mean, even with coaching, like who knows if this is gonna be Gino's last season. Like I wouldn't be shocked if after Paige left he decided to hang it up. I mean, it's been 40 years, but like it's hard to think about the identity of this team, and if you focus on Sarah Strong and you try and build around her, as much as you can and like focus all of that energy on her because she has the potential to be a phenomenal player. I think that's where they're going to find their identity in the next like few years. And I mean, it's hard because especially for a program that UConn that was like recruiting, like didn't have any issue recruiting, say like 10 years ago. And now the like landscape is so much more even. You have NIL that's a big part of it. You know, they're not recruiting as much or as well as they were like 10 years ago. You think about, I mean, that 4-year run dynasty of all Americans and Brianna Stewart's and all that. But like, yeah, it's gonna be hard for them to kind of pivot and find out like what the future is gonna be like.
And the
They're gonna
last
have
point
to.
I'll make on them is, as a team that has had really great offense, but a lot of the time what they hang their hat on is defense. When you're coming off of a game against Tennessee where you give up a 13-0 run that basically turns the tide of the game right off the bat in the third quarter, like UConn comes out, they score, and then they give up a 13-0 run, and from there they led for maybe like a possession or two after. That is, I mean, in a vacuum, again, these things happen sort of thing, but it's not happening in a vacuum. And so it's certainly a more concerning indicator, especially knowing, yep, they've got the South Carolina game, and then it's back to a Big East that is a little bit down this year. And so
Well, yeah.
how do you hone that going forward to really, if you're going to say, well, we're a better team than some of these, games indicate, or we just, our conference is a little bit down, and so we don't have the opportunity to prove it as much. Well, when they do get to the point to be able to prove it in the postseason, might be tough.
We'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point too, like I was gonna say to Tyler's earlier, like they'll probably host, yeah, but like they're gonna be looking at records and conference and all of that, but like the Big East, like UConn tears through the Big East most years since they rejoined, right? So it's like, like how much weight does that have versus say like the SEC or the Big Ten or whatever, where it's like there are so many other top ranked teams, whereas like with UConn, I think the only other team that's ranked right now is Creighton, and they like just got into the rankings
Creighton
this
just
week.
snuck in, I think, for the first time this season.
Yeah, definitely for the first time this season. So it's like, how much weight does that hold versus other conferences? But speaking of other conferences and speaking of big matchups, we have another big matchup coming up that I think everybody's excited about. I think Tyler's going to be there to see it in person, which a little jealous about that. But we have the Battle of LA, which I feel like this entire season has just kind of been like coming to. Like, I'm not going to say this is the matchup of the year, but like people have been talking. Could be.
It could be.
And there's back-to-back too. They have like they're both doing like a home and away kind of thing.
Yep.
For the first and it's UCLA, USC. You have two top ranked, like they're both top ranked teams. You have Lauren Betts, you have Juju Watkins, both in the Player of the Year conversation. There's just so many narratives going into this game. You have the conference realignment. You have the fact that both of these teams have been like tearing through the Big Ten. UCLA is undefeated, so that's another layer that's going into that. And a lot of these like ranking conversations have to do with the fact that UCLA is still undefeated. USC has also been going through a little bit of like a rough patch lately, which we've been seeing through like, their late game situations, through things like their defense, through scoring. There's been a lot of discussion about like the coaching situation and all of that. And like, there's again, like I can list the narratives going into this game. Like, is this going to be a Big Ten finals preview? Is this going to be a March Madness preview? Like, there's so much. And the fact that they're both in LA. It's not like you have like a UConn, like Notre Dame, or like a South Carolina LSU, where like one is very clearly the home team and one is very clearly the away team. Like, no matter who's home and away, there's going to be both like fans at these games because they're down the street from each other. Yeah. So I just like, there's so much going into this game that I'm so excited. Both of the games, because there's two. Like, what is something, I guess, from each of you, because again, I'm sure we could talk about this for a long time. Like, what is something that like it sticks out in your brain as like this matchup is very important, or like something in terms of the narratives, or what you're excited to see on the
Yeah.
court, or whatever. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, for me, like, this is the game that everyone's been waiting for UCLA since they beat South Carolina. Now, I think I have more respect than I feel like the general discourse has for the performances that UCLA's been putting up against the competition that they played. Because I think the Big Ten is very, very solid. But ultimately, from a narrative perspective, if you want to like kind of take that angle and POV of it, this is the game for UCLA to truly like remind everyone, remind the nation, I guess, like what that they're UCLA, that they're undefeated for a reason, that Lauren Betts is arguably the best player in the nation. Like there's so many different things with that. But from a basketball on court perspective, to be honest, it's kind of the same analysis I just had for South Carolina UConn. Like it's a lot of depth. It's one team that is very star heavy, that has players that can be the difference makers, with USC being the UConn here. I think that Juju Watkins has been in a bit of an odd spot, I feel like, in the past like run of games. And obviously, like, you beat Ohio State 84-63, but like and it's like that's a great win, especially coming into this. The Iowa loss was a weird one, but it feels like Juju's been a little bit frustrated at times, is kind of the vibe that I've been getting from her. And whether it just be the shot selection or like just the vibe, like she seems tired, she seems frustrated. I don't know exactly like what it is, but like it's different, right? And there's not that successful system that we've seen this season for. That was a little alliteration. I almost got all mixed up there. But like we haven't really seen like what is the backbone when things aren't working for USC. It's been their defense. A lot of times the defense has been solid. But from an offensive perspective, I don't feel like they've developed that still. Yeah. And obviously you have the talent most nights where you have the best players on the court, with Kiki Ariuffin, with Juju Watkins. Your freshmen the freshman class is phenomenal. I'm loving this class for them. But ultimately, that's most nights. This night you're playing against UCLA, which has probably the most talented roster in the entire nation. And so from that perspective, I worry. I have similar worries about the depth as I do with SC UConn. And also, again, if USC can kind of just get comfortable in this game, like it's at USC, which but to your point, like I don't know what the crowd split is going to be like. I don't know what that's gonna look like. So
yeah.
I'm just interested in seeing if USC can get comfortable in this game, or if they can make UCLA uncomfortable, in a way where, because I feel like if UCLA gets rolling, I don't know how confident I am in USC being able to stop UCLA once the snowball starts to form. That's my worry.
Snowball, you're gonna be in LA.
Yeah, I know. It might be the only snowball we see, but
yeah, you got to show up in the Donna Kelsey half and half jersey.
Oh yeah,
just going into you got to
LA.
Do the Lauren Betts, Juju Watkins jersey.
Yeah.
And I mean, to your point about them being tired, like I feel like this may be, and I mean UCLA is kind of negating my point here, but like this is the first year that they're in the Big Ten. These college students are traveling a lot, and like for these LA teams, you're usually going like across the country, different time zones. They're still like they're in school technically too. Like you have schoolwork, you have practice, you're traveling, all these things. I find like when they decided to do these conference realignments, obviously it was with football in the forefront of their minds, where they only play once a week, and you have time to recover. But for these basketball players, they sometimes play 2 times a week, and so it's like you're traveling, you're going back and forth. Juju's playing a ton of minutes. She's obviously,
that's the big difference.
And it's like
the ask, because like UCLA, like you have the depth. Like yes, like Lauren Betts is dominating. Don't get me wrong, but like we just saw against Oregon. Like Lauren Betts did not have a great game against Oregon, and that was a close game, right? And so like obviously UCLA is a better team and can dominate teams when Lauren Betts is having a great game, but you have London Jones that steps up in that in that way. USC is asking every single night for Juju and or Kiki to be the reason that they win games.
Yeah.
And again, they have very, very good pieces around them, but we really just haven't seen them be able to figure out the puzzle, it feels like, I don't think we've come close to seeing what the best version of this USC team can be. But folks, we're in early February. Like, there's not a ton of time left, and that's the number one team, undefeated team, most dominant team in the nation that's going to be across from you in a rivalry game. So, like, I'm just – there's every potential for USC to win this game based on the talent that they have on the roster.
Yeah.
But every indication from what we've seen so far this season, if you're looking at the whole body of work, is that UCLA should win this game.
Both. And, like, even – like, if you would have asked me, like, a month and a half ago, I would have said, like, they're splitting. Like, I think it was going to go 1-1. Seeing USC in the past, like, week or two, I'm like, now I'm not so sure. I think UCLA probably has the potential to win both. Like, wild. Jamie, what do you think?
I mean, I think back to the last time I think we really went in depth on USC, which was back in December when they beat UConn. And so at that point, I was so excited because we finally saw things, it seemed like, starting to come together for USC, where they were playing cohesively. Juju was not just a shot maker, but a playmaker, and had a lot of opportunity to kind of distribute, to go off ball, to, you know, just make things happen. And again, I don't think that this is a fault of hers or really any one specific source, but whatever the situation, you know, I'm a coach's kid, so, like, I'm not going to sit here and assign blame, but whatever the gap is in communication, in execution, there is one. And it just has not all come together in the way that I think it has been proven they're capable of, but for whatever reason, it just is not consistently materializing. And so that's where you get into the extremely high ask of Juju to have so much run through her. And I don't know if she feels the weight of the world is on her shoulders, if the weight of the world is being put on her shoulders. You know, those are two different things, and are very, very difficult to work through, especially, you know, she's an underclassman as well. Like, she's played so many big consequential minutes, but she's still partway through her sophomore year. And so it's a really tough spot to be in. On the other side, you have a UCLA team that, Tyler, you're hitting on exactly the point I was going to, in that Oregon game is just another example of figuring it out and finding a way to win and finding a way to continue to elevate. That was maybe the second time this season that Lauren Betts has gone up against someone remotely close to her stature. The first maybe being Penn State, and even so, Merkel's not quite her height. She's got a couple inches on her, and she was able to get her into really significant foul trouble. So you go up against Philippina Shea, who was able to bump Lauren Betts off of her spots, was able to have the length to say, well, you're going to have to get through me, get around me. You can't just shoot over me like you usually do. And then Oregon sending doubles, digging in. You know, they're doing the things that you have to do in order to make things difficult for Lauren Betts. And so you have players willing to step up, in this case, London Jones, which that is so important that it was London Jones, because we've seen Kiki Rice do it. We've seen, we've seen great games from Tamia Gardner, from Janiyah Barker, Lena Arnisalo has been a revelation in some games.
I love her game.
You can go through and you can pick out a game for almost every single player in UCLA's rotation where they've been able to really take over. And maybe some of them have been against inferior competition, but a lot of them have not been. They've just consistently been able to find that additional contributor. And the fact that it's not always the same person or people, where you can say, well, probably their top offensive option is going to be Lauren Betts, and then probably the second one is going to be Kiki Rice, but that's not a given. And then beyond those two, good luck figuring out who it's going to be. And so it's a tough matchup for anyone. The best option you can have to be able to beat UCLA is someone who has any ability to go one-on-one with Lauren Betts. And very, very few players in this country have the ability to do that. You're going to be asking a lot of, to me, Clarissa Kunwafo. Like, I think that is someone who, she's going to need to do her big one if you're going to stay in this game, because you cannot commit 3 resources to Lauren Betts on every defensive possession. You can maybe commit 2. Better if it's 1.5. But it like a quick dig down. But you need someone who can go behind Lauren Betts and can bump her off the spot, that can be long, that can make things difficult. I don't know if USC has anyone who's quite ready for that, because they're better post players, just don't have the height for it. I think that's just the biggest issue, is that Lauren Betts is tall and very, very strong, and so you just got a tough matchup in there, and I don't know that you have enough other spots that you have an advantage to impose. Yeah.
I mean, UCLA just has the capability to change the variables, and USC really doesn't. Like, that's the biggest thing for me, and that's like where, like, obviously, like, the exhaustion factor is big for depth, and especially, you know, for your stars if you're USC. But to me, the depth, the biggest boost of it is that they can change the way that they play at any moment if something is not working. Like, yes, 100%. Option number 1 is going to be, let's figure out how Lauren's doing today, right? If you're UCLA. But past that, when it comes to, if it's not working, you have so many different angles you can take. And whether it's speeding the game up, slowing the game down, spreading the floor, going big, like, you have literally everything at your disposal if you're Corey Close. And again, USC, I feel like if the stars are starring, and I think you're going to need at least one of the freshmen to have a very solid game, whether that be Kennedy Smith just impacting the game, even if it's not directly her scoring, or if it's one of the freshmen off the bench that's able to help spread the floor a little bit. Like, I mean, I've been harping on the freshmen all season and the depth that they can bring, but they haven't fully been factored in. And, like, to me, this is the game where, like, you really need one of them to step up and be that third, because UCLA is going to have, at minimum, on any given night, you're going to have at least 2 very good contributors. Normally, that's Lauren Betts and a lot of times Kiki Rice. But at minimum, you're going to have 2. So who is going to be the team with the third, with the fourth? And I'm banking on UCLA against any team in the nation to have the third and the fourth. And so that's where the depth really comes into me, where they can just change the game if something's not working. USC kind of has one motor, one motion, one row that they can take. And if that takes them to the promised land, more power to you. But when it comes to changing the variables and being able to adjust and everything, UCLA has the capability to do that better than probably any team in the nation. The only team that comes close is South Carolina in that way, to me, when it comes to being able to adjust the way you play. But even then, UCLA still just has way too many different modes for any one team to just beat them in one way over the course of the game.
Yeah, it's wild. So yeah, I think we're all pretty much agreed on that UCLA probably has the edge in both of these games coming up in the next little while for UCLA and USC. I mean, then that like brings us to, I guess, like eventually the Big Ten tournament, which we'll probably talk about later, like when it gets closer. But that's another one. Like I was saying earlier, the SEC tournament is going to be wild, but the Big Ten tournament, I could see some teams kind of coming up and going on some sort of like Cinderella run. I could see UCLA and USC being there at the end. Like that's going to be wild. And that's super exciting. I mean, Michigan just beat Michigan State over the weekend after Michigan State beat Michigan a few weeks ago. Like they
back for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And especially because it was like both teams went into the other's arena and beat them, which was so fun. Yeah, and then you have all these other Big Ten sleeper teams that could possibly go on a big run.
Even Oregon. Like, the defense from Oregon that they can play. If Oregon can just make threes, they win games. Like, that's literally been the case. Like, every game they've lost, they've shot terrible from three. If they can just make threes, like, they are a genuinely dangerous team. Like, they went 2-17 against UCLA from three. And you lose by 10, right? So, like, a couple more of those threes fall, and we might be having a very different conversation right now.
Potential over
Iowa.
The SEC. You just had, I mean, you had Ole Miss take down Kentucky. Like, I think that especially with changed formats for a lot of tournaments, it's gonna be we're gonna have to like really lock in on our rundowns when we're coming up to conference tournament
For
time
sure.
because there's gonna be
man.
a lot of discussion to be had there.
Get ready for the 3-hour conference preview episode. It's gonna be a movie, literally, because it will be 3 hours long. No, but yeah, okay. Before we head out, because again we've been yapping, I want to throw y'all like a curveball. I don't know if I'm not like a big baseball person, but
that
okay.
worked. Go ahead.
Okay, so I want to know from you, and I don't know. I know Tyler's been keeping up, but I know Jamie needs to go and watch the film. But still, it's whatever. Who do you think is going to win the Unrivaled one-on-one tournament?
I was thinking about that. Oh my
god!
Pick.
It's Fee.
It's Fee.
It's Fee.
Yeah.
It's Fee.
Like, I'm looking here.
Fee's on a different planet.
Oh my gosh, she's on a different planet. I was so happy with Skylar Diggins-Smith yesterday. The way, and again, I don't know, but like she was waving her finger. I was like, it's one-on-one. Why are you asking for the review?
Yeah, I don't think there's reviews in the one-on-one tournament. Like, I don't.
The way that she had such a strategic way to beat Dearica Hamby, I was like,
no, Skylar Diggins-Smith, and I mean this in the absolute most complimentary way possible. She is an absolute basketball psycho, sicko, whatever, like anything that you could think of. It's Skylar Diggins-Smith. Like,
oh man, like I don't know if what she wants to do. Like, she still has lots of basketball playing years left in her, but if she were coached, like that'd be
so funny.
Oh, her
Skylar on the sidelines would be electric.
Okay, yeah, it would be hilarious, but like also just like her mind.
Like, Fee is gonna have truly like the potential for such a fun run of matchups to potentially win it though, because as I'm looking at the bracket, the way that I'm seeing it is she already is scheduled to play Rickea Jackson. I think from there's a very good chance that she'd be seeing Shakira Austin, and then you'd be potentially looking at a matchup with Satu, Alicia Gray, Aaliyah Edwards, or I mean, kind of a sleeper would be Skylar in the final. Like,
Arike, like Arike's gonna be wild. Ryan Howard, I was saying this before her match yesterday, and then she ended up mentioning it after, but like one-on-one is slightly similar to FIBA 3x3. Like the way that you have kind of like the half
more
court,
similar, than like 3-on-3 they're playing.
Exactly. And so you have to clear the 3-point line. There's passing. Like, Ryan Howard is used to this kind of play. Sure, you don't have the other two players to kind of play off of, but the way that she has to operate is similar. And so I could see Ryan Howard having a good...
I guess that's the one matchup I skipped over that Fee would potentially be seeing on the way to the finals.
Yeah.
Man,
Arike is gonna... Oh, man. And then there's players tonight that we haven't seen because of the way those buys work. So, like, I'm excited to see Dejanay versus Satu. Like, you have Courtney Williams getting into it. I mean, Aaliyah Edwards, like I mentioned earlier, just absolutely, in a minute and 57 seconds, absolutely tore up Brianna Stewart. And Stewie was a great sport about it, which, like, great. But, like...
She's better than me. I would have been mad. I would have been mad as hell.
But, like, you have Aaliyah Edwards, your teammate, not only, but also you played for the same college. There's a lot of love there. Just coming in absolutely, like, putting you on skates. Like, and a lot of people...
In your league.
In your league.
How you gonna do this to me in the league that I made, that I own? Like, how are you gonna...
Like, you think that you've seen a bad sport? I will take that to a new level. Like,
I would have...
and like...
I would have been a horrible human being after
Not that people sleep on Aaliyah, because she does get a lot of love, but as someone who has watched Aaliyah Edwards for years, and I said this on Instagram, which I think is funny, mostly because I know Kayla, so like it was kind of a jab, but like Aaliyah Edwards has played against Kayla Alexander in practice. She's played with her. She's been teammates like for years. Like if anyone was going to come out and like kind of beat the veteran, like Kayla Alexander, Brianna Stewart, like it's similar, you know, playing style, similar position, whatever. And so, like, I was like, yeah, like, Kayla Alexander prepared her for that. Yeah, she's built for it. Aaliyah Edwards, she's been playing with the senior national team for, like, 5 years now, if not more. She was ready for this. Like, she, like, has been playing with these vets for a long time. And especially, like, I think that was a little bit of, I said it was a win for Canada, but, like, Aaliyah Edwards has been beat by USA Basketball, just like the whole rest of the world. And so I was like, boom. There you go. Not to make it all like Canada, but obviously, yeah, to make it all Canada because it's me. But that was like such vindication on my part. And the fact that it was like a 12-0, a minute and 50-second run. Oh,
it was domination. That was crazy.
Like
blink and you miss it.
Blink and you miss it. And like that's the kind of thing I've been hoping for on the Canada basketball side for years, and we will get there. The Leah Edwards, Silas Swords era is coming. Whoo! But anyway, that was just my rant for a second there. But like, oh man, this and like matchups aside, people were a little skeptical about this one-on-one tournament. I had a blast last night. I was loving it. Like, it was like, you have all these little like one-on-ones, they're jabbing against each other, they're having fun. It's all love in the end. Like, they're all very like, you know, they get it. But like, and just seeing how gassed they were getting, I was like, ooh.
The conditioning you gotta have is crazy.
Ooh. And like, just seeing the shots that were happening, Skylar Diggins-Smith like defending De'Erica Hamby, Aaliyah, and like, it was entertainment at its core. And even like, again, not to make it about men, but I was like, if the NBA All-Star Game did this, people would be absolutely losing their minds. So anyway, I've been loving this one-on-one tournament. I had to kind of get my take in there at the end here, as you all know, as I do. But yeah, that's happening again. We're filming this on Tuesday at 7, and then Friday is like the finale of it all. So tune in. But anyway, I just got really energetic there for a minute. Wow. Meanwhile, I rolled out of bed like 5 minutes before we started recording.
I think your take lasted longer than the Aaliyah Edwards Stewie game.
Yeah, it did actually. Great take on that one. All right, so let's end it here just because we've been yapping again for almost an hour. Thanks for joining us, I guess. I don't know what I'm saying. I just like my whole mind.
Did you just black out? Are you okay? Are you good?
Like, Edwards.
All right, here. I'll take over.
Okay,
Thanks so
you
much
take
for
it.
watching, listening. Make sure that you check out all the other shows on the Her Hoop Stats Network. As always, a whole lot of great content coming at you there. We will be on our respective social media platforms, as always, firing off takes here and there. At Jay Stiles, at Chelsea Late, at Tyler DeLuca. You could find us there, and we will be back next week.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.